Friends and subscribers, this is China News for January 2015. A lot going on this first month of 2015, so let's get right into it. Beijing sees record land rush as they open up more districts in Beijing for what else? Real estate speculation. Hard to believe, but most nations, when they have a real estate bubble, they tend to pull back and put in capital controls and do all kinds of things to try to subdue or to close down a overheated market. But in China, they do exactly the opposite. Opening up more suburban sites for development has only caused the housing price to increase abnormally when it shouldn't. 22% higher than the government's opening price represents right now a 20,600 yuan per square meter opening price for these new development areas in Beijing. What's this mean? Well, it means that either people in Beijing have way too much money to spend, or there's going to be a glut of defaults down the road as property prices surge again to, I guess, counter the recent dip. And so, at least in Beijing, property is hot. I can't say that in many other cities in China, but for the meantime, they're very confident, obviously, that they can sustain even more development in an overdeveloped area. Now, that leads me to my next topic here. In Shanghai, earlier this month, what happened? Well, we had a problem with overpopulation, and during a riverfront walk celebration, there were tens of thousands of people too many, and of course what happened is people died. They were crushed. And this has raised all kinds of questions about China's plan for urban development. Are they wishful thinking? Can they open up these urban areas and have more and more people from the countryside come in? And can they do it effectively without compromising safety? Chinese housing bubble continues and urban sprawl continues. The social problems, well, they continue as well. The news sending shockwaves all through Asia. Hong Kong halts investment visas, and this is, of course, from mounting pressure from Beijing to do so. Why? Because the Xi Jinping regime, as you know, is cutting down on corruption, and they're doing so even in Hong Kong, where in the past a lot of well-heeled Chinese could go to Hong Kong, do some investment, gain residency, and of course have an opportunity to launder money or to gain real estate investments and other things abroad. So what does this mean? Well, it means that currently a minimum of 10 million Hong Kong dollars is required to gain residency and invest in Hong Kong. Okay, but the problem is that they're limiting the number of these types of investment visas that are available. So, in other words, basically, if you're not a well-connected person, you won't be able to even pony up the 10 million Hong Kong dollars to do investment in Hong Kong for real estate. Shockwaves felt throughout Asia as the Shanghai Stock Exchange falls 7.7% in just one day, the steepest decline since 2008. This has raised many concerns with Chinese regulators that they will start to have penalties levied against all traders and margin requirements for borrowing money to leverage in to these types of trades on a overbought bubble Chinese Shanghai Stock Exchange. Like I said many years ago, even the Chinese stocks are overvalued. It's not just the West, not just the Dow and the other markets around the world, but when you've got speculators borrowing money in the millions and billions of yuan to invest in a bubble stock market, you've got serious problems. And this is just a tip of the iceberg as we see that currencies have slid. In Switzerland earlier this month, currency slid there as the Swiss franc was devalued and unpegged. Following that up, Turkey also devaluing their currency, and others talking about devaluing their currencies to follow. Like I said a couple years ago, that this is a currency war. It's a race to the bottom. And if you're not holding precious metals such as gold and silver, you're going to be left with less real earnings and income to borrow against than you had before the crisis. So let this be a warning that everyone is going to debase their currencies. No fiat currency has ever survived. They've all failed. And every fiat currency in every nation around the world out there today, they are no different. Protect yourself with gold and silver. On the heels of 2 Japanese journalists being beheaded by so-called Islamic extremists, China is taking the opportunity to cut down on enemies, so-called, in the Xinjiang region. Uyghurs no longer allowed to wear burqas. A bad time to be a Muslim in China, that's for sure. And this should open up a whole string of tit-for-tat fights within China to do with freedom of religion, freedom of expression, freedom of the press, and so on and so on. Now, China's new laws and legislations for anti-terrorism will then allow them to cut down on other enemies in China and beyond who threatened the system of rule by the Chi-Coms. The new anti-terrorism drafts license to commit abuses, and anything that they feel to be an abuse and involved with terrorism will be swiftly cut down. Now, never let a good crisis go to waste, so they say, so China is doing exactly what their Western counterparts have done in the past. They're taking the opportunity to put a veil over any kind of crackdown that they want, especially in Hong Kong, that has to do with anti-terrorism. They can define it any way they want. Those accused have little chance for a fair trial, no proper discovery of facts and evidence in their trial, and of course no due process. Now, China is supposed to be a country that has freedom of religion, and they pride themselves on having ethnic diversity, but in fact, in reality, in practice, it is one of the most oppressive places on earth when it comes to diversity. The cartoon of the month tells us a lot. It's a simple cartoon, but it shows that China is giving a helping hand to the struggling Russian bear from sanctions from the West and decline in crude oil prices. This tells us a lot about the two countries, giving you a helping hand, comrade, as China guarantees some low-interest loans to Russia, as well as buying more crude and natural gas. We'll see how this plays out when it comes to a military alliance down the road, but we can see that China and Russia are still on very friendly terms when it comes to geopolitics. A lot's being written and spoken about the Paris attack, which the Chinese are in fact smart enough to realize that this is simply either a false flag or an opportunity knocks moment for the technocrats that want to push for anti-Muslim and gun control agendas. And now, don't be duped by this. Regardless of how many people were killed, or if there were people killed, or if it was a actual terrorist attack, or if it was an operation called Black Ops by intelligence agencies, you should know that the end game is to promote new agendas that will take away your personal rights and point the finger at party or parties that had nothing to do with the attack. Same old song and dance, fear the public, Terror Incorporated, and you should be smart enough to see through the lies. I hope you are. Quite a stir was created here early in the month as Barack Obama made a comment, "You would not want your kids growing up in Beijing right now," as he laughed at it. And he poses for a picture here with face masks for breathing in the air to filter out the pollution. Well, it wasn't taken as quite a joke in China, as many people feel somewhat embarrassed by the fact that the President of the United States called out Beijing as being overpolluted. Another rather curious and disturbing news bit from earlier in the month. Basically, Mark Zuckerberg was here talking with Chinese entrepreneurs and Chinese officials about their internet system and how Facebook can be more widely expected in Asia. He bought copies of Chinese propaganda, socialism publications, and gave them to his friends. Now, this kind of is very disturbing when you consider that Mr. Zuckerberg has gotten much of his success based on the American model of free enterprise and entrepreneurship, yet he's promoting command control economy and crony communism. Very curious to see, but basically, a whore is a whore and will sell themselves out for anything. And in this case, it's an opportunity to increase Facebook's presence in Asia. So, Zuckerberg, a commie at heart? U.S.-based Dunkin' Donuts looking to open 1,400 additional stores in China. That basically would bring locations to 3,200 and allow them to compete directly with Starbucks. Now, why are they doing this? Well, because China is a growing market for coffee, and also they will also offer tea products as well. And donuts being promoted in China as something that Chinese people don't traditionally eat, but they're customizing their menus for the Chinese palate. So, will Dunkin' Donuts be able to give Starbucks a run for its money in China? Also, Costa Coffee and Pacific Coffee to be key competitors. And this news story from the bizarre and wacky culture that is mainland China. A woman aborted her pregnancy of her second child after her 13-year-old daughter threatened to kill herself. Now, this story is 100% real, and there are many more stories like this throughout China that I can tell you about. Some of them too horrific for me to explain on YouTube, but they are all very real. The social problems here run much, much deeper than any of you should expect. But basically what happened is she calls her daughter Princess, and this is the emperor and empress syndrome in China, where there's been single child policy for so long that a lot of the children in China that grow up as single children are so spoiled that they dictate what happens in the family, and they get most of the resources from the parents, including having the parents take out loans or spend their savings on what many Chinese call a Apple set, which would be a triple set, which would be an iPad, an iPhone, and a Mac Air book. This is very common, especially in the communities around Shanghai and other wealthy areas of China. Now, basically what happened is the daughter threatened to jump from a tall building if the mother had the child, which would take away from her attention and to take away from her resources that she is cornering in the family. And unbelievably, the mother and father agreed to abort their baby because their young child is too selfish. Hundreds of Chinese trapped by fighting in Myanmar, which is Burma, which has recently opened up, especially to Chinese investment in other countries. And what a lot of people don't understand is that there's a lot of Chinese already in Myanmar. And what are they doing there? They're mining. They're mining for jade. They're mining for gold and silver and other natural resources, developing trade agreements, doing more than just mining and setting up possible energy deals. There are 2,000 Chinese in Myanmar who are mining for natural resources on sweetheart deals with their government. The same can be said for many other nations around the world. There are more Chinese there mining for resources and doing business than what you may have been told. And this is only to increase over the years, and it brings up the question of national security for your country wherever you're at. Is it important to you that they limit the number of work visas for Chinese nationals in your country? Despite the slowdown in Asia, Shanghai is still the world's busiest big box port. Now this is followed by, of course, Singapore, Shenzhen, and Hong Kong. But what many of you may not know is that there are two other ports in China that are growing rapidly. This in addition to, of course, Busan in South Korea, which does a lot of business too. But the ports of Ningbo, which is just to the south of Shanghai, growing quite rapidly, and also the port of Dandong in northern China, right on the North Korean border and close to it, is also growing. They're close to Dalian and close to North Korea, so it's interesting up there. If you ever get a chance to go up there to the port of Dandong in that area, you'll be able to interact with North Koreans on the border because they have a very limited free trade market there at the border where they sell simple goods. And that's one way you can interact with some North Koreans without actually going into North Korea. So that's it. That's the ports that are of interest, and that is China News for January 2015.